even before I accepted the call to full-time ministry, I worked as a volunteer in my church in Marietta, Georgia. And then later, I became their part-time youth director. And that was all pre-Kindle, in the era before Kendall McCormick was born. And so you can imagine that this young child has been dragged to all kinds of church events since she was in utero. And so one of the things I like to do is I've cataloged a few of the funny stories that Kendall has given me over the years. And one of them involves when I was directing the choir at my church in Marietta. I would sit on the first row closest to the choir, and at the appointed time, I would get the choir's attention and stand them for the choir anthem. And I nodded to the pianist, and I got her started, and the choir started singing. And then I noticed that their little mouths, one by one, started curling up into smiles. And then they got the snickers, and they started laughing, and they could barely sing. And then it started traveling throughout the congregation. And it seemed like I was the only one not in on the joke, which struck fear in my heart. All I could imagine is that I was standing there in front of the entire congregation with the end of my skirt tucked into my pantyhose or something like that. So I turned around to look behind me, and there, little 2-year-old Kendall was standing on the chair, directing the choir behind me with arms just flailing. Then I was in seminary here in Kentucky, and she was about 3 or 4, and for one reason or another, the daycare center just was inconveniently closed one day when I had class. So you do what any good mother does. You load up your child and you get some coloring pages and some things to keep them occupied. And off to seminary I went with my young child. And that day, that morning, I had Introduction to Bible with Dr. Jerry Sumney. And he was explaining, if I recall correctly, the origin of the concept of afterlife. It really wasn't part of the worldview for most of the people for whom the Hebrew Scriptures are written. And it came to be developed in the Apocrypha, or the intercanonical writings between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. And so he was saying from a historical perspective that those people believed once you died, you just died. And we're all going to die. From which a little voice whispered loudly for all to hear, "We're all going to die." Then, fast forward a few years, I was serving at Central Christian, and we had a disciples women's meeting at one of the women's houses, and again, there was no school that day, and I had to give the lesson. So I dragged him with me, and I promised her if she would just be good, I'll get her a treat or we'll go do something fun after this disciples women's meeting. And so I gave the lesson, and we sat through the rest of the meeting. And the topic of this meeting was trying to get the women to sign up to bring items to a bake sale that was going to occur at church in a few more weeks. And the leader of the circle was just trying with all her might to get these women to sign up to bring something. And I gotta tell you, they didn't seem fully inspired to want to bring anything to this bake sale. And so the lady lowered the bar, and she finally said, "You know, women, it doesn't have to be homemade," to which Kendall confidently added, "But it's better if it is." So it doesn't have to be the very best that we have to offer, but it's better if it is. Words of wisdom from a child. And I was reminded of that this week when I was reading this prophet Micah and what he's trying to get across to tell his people. See, his people are terrified. They're in a terrible predicament. They are refugees of war living in a far-off land, and they're trying to make sense of how they got to this stage in their lives. Sometimes when bad things happened, it was interpreted religiously that they were being punished for some sin that they had committed. And you heard that in what Polly was reading. What transgressions did Jacob do to deserve this? The prophet is trying to help them realize that, yes, indeed, they have been scattered, but their God is not going to leave them scattered in all these far-off lands, but God is going to gather them up like a shepherd. And not only will God gather them up, but that same shepherd who gathers and guards them will feed and take care of them. And one day, once again, they shall know security. All of this will take place not because of some great army that God's going to send to exact violence on their enemies and set them free, but because peace shall prevail. And one day, they will be able to go back home. And there is this small, insignificant place in the Bible. It's Bethlehem of Judah. This will be the place where they will come back. Bethlehem in Hebrew means house of bread. So these people who have nothing, who fled with only the cloaks on their backs, are one day going to know such abundance, such plenty, that they are going to live in a house of bread. And from there, they will live in safety, security, and peace. And they will all be well-fed indeed. You will remember from our Hebrew Bible scriptures that their religious life was ordered around offerings. They brought a grain offering for one thing, or a fatted calf for another. Sometimes at the temple, you will remember, they would have to change their foreign money so that they could go and buy a dove. Or if they were at home, they may take their best ram. Whatever they needed to do, they would offer that to God. And this was a way of putting them back into right relationship with God. If the harvest or if the flock had been particularly good, they would give an offering of thanksgiving to God. If they felt that they had lived a little less than how God wanted them to live, they might come with an offering to try to get back into good relationship with God. Maybe a sin offering or a guilt offering. But that is how they lived. That's how they ordered their life and their relationship with God. That is why God sent Jesus to be the final offering to end that sacrificial system of relationship. And so here they are in this far-off land, and they must be wondering, well, what can we do here to put ourselves back into right relationship with God? They must be wondering, for this reality that Mike is describing, for it to occur, this is going to take an awfully big offering on our part. But how shall this happen, they must wonder. How will we know? How do we repay God for this extravagant way that we're going to live? They must have asked these things, and they must have wondered to one another. How do we bring a sacrificial offering when we're in this place and we don't have access to our religious life and we have nearly nothing? What does the Lord require of us? Do you hear the anxiety in their voices? With what shall I come and bow down before the Lord? Shall I come before God with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Don't you start to feel this way about this time of the year? Just as soon as you round the bend on fall, and perhaps you feel like you're in good financial footing to end 2018 on a high note, you think it's only a little while longer, and then we can close the books of this year, and we can begin afresh in 2019. And next year, that's going to be the year I get my financial house in order. I've been listening to Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey, and I know I'm going to get it together this year. I'm going to maximize my contribution to my Roth IRA, and I will diligently save 10% of my earnings, and I will become more generous to all the causes that matter to me if I can just make it, God, to 2019. And then the phone rings. You don't recognize the number. You don't even know if you should answer it. And well, you do. And you've received calls, as sure as I have, these are people reading a script, and they're from a wonderful organization, and they want to know if they can count on you for your contribution this year. Or you get that email with an offer to match your contribution, or some still do it the old-fashioned way, and they'll send you something in the mail, and when you open it, this organization that you've never even donated to before somehow knows the secret way into your heart and your soul, and they've already provided you with these pre-printed return address stickers. And oh my Lord, they're adorable. They're dogs and cats, and they want me to donate to this organization that helps with stray animals. And well, I really hadn't planned on doing it this year. Now I've got that ethical dilemma. Do I still use these return address stamps? They're already made, and they're made out to me. It would just be a waste not to use them. And so you understand how this plays out at the end of the year. At Central Christian, we had a tradition for our staff Christmas party. We would do a secret Santa where we would pick names out of a hat. And after you pick that person's name, you would try to determine, based on how well you knew them and what their values and priorities were, a donation made in their honor to an organization that you thought would be something they would want. And so you would make this donation in their name, and then at the party, we would read out all the donations and try to figure out if we could match it to the person it was made in honor of. It was very interesting. And so that's a really nice, holy way of honoring the holidays with one another and not getting an accumulation of stuff you just don't need. But what do you think the downside of that tradition is? Once that organization has your contact information, even though it's just a one-time donation, they will contact you until the day you die. It's almost easier just to change your identity, just to get off their mailing list. Personally, I would like to give on a patron level to some things that I appreciate. Christ Mount Christian Assembly. I also make an annual donation to Heifer International. And I like to give to the seminary because they so generously gave to me. And throughout the year, we have all these opportunities to be generous. We give to Operation Food Basket, the Well, the Backpack Program. We give to our wonderful friends at Cane Ridge. We love Central Kentucky Ride for Hope. These are all such good organizations, and there are so many good causes. Not to mention that the Christian church has special offerings throughout the year to support the units of the church who also do such good work in the world. So think about these with me. You'll recognize them. We support Week of Compassion. Sometimes we do the Race and Reconciliation Ministry offering. We support higher education and leadership ministries. We support new church starts, the Christian Church in Kentucky, and also the General Church. Those are our unit offerings. And these are all wonderful things. But don't you get the feeling like you wish you had the money to support all of these things? I wish I could contribute to all of them. However, the reality is, I must pick and choose. And I imagine you're in that same situation. You have to pick and choose the causes that you will support, where you will let your energy and your money go. And just when you thought all the asks have been asked, here comes your stewardship committee with Charlie at the helm, and they've also got an ask for a piece of the pie. You received a letter in the mail a couple of weeks ago with a pledge card in it, and it has this logo, "What shall we bring?" on it. And you might be thinking, in the tradition of Popeye, well, I'll bring what I bring, and that's all that I'll bring. And you know what I can bring when I bring it. And I suppose that would be fine. That might be how many of you give to the church throughout your lives. We want you to give every gift as you are able. And we want it also to magnify your heart. We are hoping it comes with intention and some planning and definitely some praying. We hope this year you'll be able to estimate that gift so that the church can plan for exciting ministries and missions. We don't want you to feel anxious like those Israelites living in a far-off land. We don't want you to be wondering, God, how can I get back in your favor? What do I have to bring? Is it a calf or 1,000 rams or my firstborns? You might be thinking like them, we can't give extravagantly. We don't have it to give. But then the prophet comforts them, and he says that's not what it's about. It's not about giving in such extravagance that which you do not have. And he says, think, you already know what's required of you. To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. That is the requirement of God. Any gifts that you have are great, but this is the first and foremost requirement. In other words, don't give to God any gift of extravagance unless you have this requirement first in order. You can't give extravagantly at the altar and then go out and fail to live by God's instructions the other 6 days of the week. God's system does not work like that. And doesn't it make you curious when a corporation that doesn't even bother to pay their workers a living wage, they have terrible environmental practices, they'll suddenly give this big, generous contribution to a great cause? It makes us wonder, why can't they just be ethical in the first place in their daily living, in their business practices, and then when that contribution is made, and it is fine and right to do so, it's in alignment with their values. It reminds us of those guilt offerings in the Bible, doesn't it? And we are wise to remember another prophet, this one by the name of Amos. And in chapter 5 of the book of his names, he quotes God to the people saying, I hate and I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. A stench. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you choose to bring fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps until you let justice roll down like a river and righteousness like a never-failing stream. Don't bring any gift to God that is not in alignment with your daily ethic, which is in alignment with God's wishes. We cannot do one thing in the house of the Lord and then do something else all the rest of our days. God despises that kind of giving and that kind of worship that supports it. Offerings and your life, they are seamless. They are one and the same. So what shall we bring before the Lord? An offering that is honest and true. And to be honest and true in the eyes of God, it must be one that goes to support justice, so that all people, even like those Israelites in a far-off land, they have access to the things they need for daily living. Bring a gift that supports mercy and compassion. These are the ministries that I hope that we are supporting in our community and beyond. Your gift is an extension of you. And so now a word about extravagance, because there are several of you I know that give extravagantly. There are those who made it possible for our church to have a birthday celebration. They made it happen. There are those who come up to me and whisper in my ear, if we need to make this happen, Pastor, you let us know. we're there for you. We'll support it financially. And so I'm not one who will deny you that opportunity to give extravagantly. You can give above and beyond in ways, and I know many of you do, monetarily and also in your time and service and in your talents. And I also know that when you do so, your hearts are in alignment with your gifts. We appreciate your gestures because they allow us to do very, very special things here. But what does that mean for the rest of us? Those who can't give with extravagance. What the church really needs are those who give regularly and attend steadily. Just like the prophet comforted the people by saying, you don't have to give an extravagant gift. In fact, he already knew they didn't have it to give. He reminded them what was already pleasing to God. And that is the same for us. Giving what we can with glad and joyous hearts and living out the ethic of love in all that we do. That is the offering that God wants. And that is what the church needs. So therefore, there is no need to feel overwhelmed or pressured or anxious. In fact, if you are feeling any of those things today, I would encourage you not to turn in a pledge card because that indicates you're not quite ready to make that step. And that's okay. We can reflect on this further. We can have further study and prayer. We should only do what is pleasing to God and what makes your heart feel good. Just like the women who weren't inspired to go out and bake for the bake sale, we don't have to bring our best. We could just let the plate come by us and put in some denominational money or not. We could just throw it in there. We could put in our card without much thought. It could go right by us, and it could be brought forward, and it would be done, and we could go about our merry way. But just as the wisdom of a child reminds us, it's always better if we can give our best. And by that, I don't mean the size of the gift. I mean the intention with which it is given. It doesn't have to be homemade, or in this case, the best, most extravagant gift you can give. But it's better if it's given straight from the heart. That is an offering that is pleasing to God, and one God would welcome with open arms.